Voiceover.
Any recorded human voice placed over a visual other than the actor. Usually. We'll get there eventually. Some people mistake voiceover for just reading words off a page, but any actor worth their salt knows that voiceover is voice acting. And bringing a character to life with just your mouth and vocal cords is not as simple as just reading.
Surprise! You fell for the old sick Joker guy, Batman.
But where did the art originate? How has it evolved in the past, say, 150 years? I haven't been able to find any videos that really break it down from the 1800s to today, so here I am to do just that. Hi, I'm YouTuber Brizzy Voices and voice actor Anna Brisbane. Kind of like Batman, I have two identities, except it's not a secret anymore. And this is the history of voiceover. Little known fact, your voiceovers are far more compelling if you do finger guns. I started work on this video in February, and it's now April, and the script is 17 pages long, so I'm gonna spare you some sanity and split this into 3 parts. Today, I take you back to the very beginning. Let's go back as far as we possibly can to the first sounds recorded by humankind. The person most people associate with first recorded speech is Thomas Edison, but brushing over the fact that Thomas Edison was kind of a douchebag, let's go back even further to some people less spoken about. In 1850, physicist Claude Sauvé-Mathias Pouillet published a book, Notions générales de physique et de météorologie à l'usage de la jeunesse.
Notions générales de physique et de météorologie à l'usage de la jeunesse.
Or General Notions of Physics and Meteorology for the Use of Youth. It just, rolls off the tongue. In it, he describes how he determined the numerical frequencies associated with each note on a musical scale. Using tuning forks and a spinning inked wheel, he counted the number of vibrations from each note in an octave. He also included this mysterious waveform. And being from 1850 or even earlier, this is the earliest recorded sound known to history. First Sounds Collaborative played this waveform at the 8 different frequencies that Pouillet noted in his book, and it resulted in this. What, you're expecting John Williams? Okay, so that doesn't sound like a tuning fork per se, but these are clearly the 8 different notes of the octave, and it was recorded in 1850. It's freaking cool. But a tuning fork is not a person. Shocking, I know, but that means we can't call this the first recorded voice. That was captured in the late 1850s by Edward Léon Scott de Martinville.
Edouard Léon Scott de Martinville.
Sure, the catch is that it was recorded without the expectation of ever being played back and actually heard. The sound was recorded for posterity, but with no means of playback. But by the end of 1857, his phonograph was recording sounds. And 151 years later, in 2008, the First Sounds Collaborative managed to make some of his recordings audible. The earliest clearly recognizable record of the human voice yet recovered is from April 9th, 1860. A snippet of Scott singing the French folk song Au clair de la lune. Wasn't that just the most beautiful singing you've ever heard, Remus? You just want to set that as your alarm in the morning to wake up to every day. Now the first to blow minds by actually playing back a recording of the human voice for people to actually hear with their ears? Thomas Edison, of course, with his tinfoil phonograph invented in 1877, on tour in 1878. The phonograph was used by shouting into a doohickey. The doohickey vibrated a needle. The needle created a unique indentation on a rotating sheet of tinfoil. Then, that rotating sheet of tinfoil could be played back so that you could hear the sound back. I don't understand the step between the tinfoil going back and the sound coming out of it. I don't understand that part. but that's how it works. This recording, played by Edison on tour in 1878, is actually believed to be the voice of Thomas Mason, not Edison. The original 1877 tinfoil recording of Mary Had a Little Lamb by Edison himself is believed to be lost. Now, first voiceover artist is a complicated title to give because it depends on your definition. I would personally like to give the title of first voiceover artist to a group of unnamed women who worked on one of Thomas Edison's greatest failures, the talking doll. After the debut of Edison's phonograph using flimsy, fragile tinfoil, Edison turned his focus to creating the light bulb. Meanwhile, Alexander Graham Bell, his cousin Chichester, and Charles Sumner Tainter these names, Chichester, Tainter, they began working on improving the phonograph. And by the mid-1880s, they had established a wax cylinder as a far superior replacement for the tinfoil. They released their own graphophone.
There are more things in heaven and earth, holy, that are clarified in our philosophy. I am a graphophone, and my mother was a phonographer.
Which motivated Edison to go, hey, no, I can do that, and go back to work on his own phonograph to increase commercial value. And in 1890, that resulted in Edison's talking doll. Embedded in each massive doll's tin torso was a tiny phonograph with a wax cylinder, onto which women working for Edison would record a 20-second nursery rhyme like Jack and Jill, Hickory Dickory Dock, or Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And children could turn the crank on the heavy doll's back and have her speak. But each of these wax cylinders had to be recorded individually.
We think of the very first entertainment records, the very first children's records, the very first time that women's voices are recorded on record, they all happened with this doll.
More than just the first known recordings of women's voices, this is the first known instance of any hired recording voice artist. And these women were giving dolls voices. Yeah, they were just kind of screaming into the phonograph, but it was a voice for the doll. They were technically playing a character, so I'd argue these women, up to about 18 of them, apparently, were the first professional voice actors. But it was an utter failure. The dolls were clunky, the wax cylinders would often get damaged in transport, and children found the voices creepy. I don't know what they're talking about. That's like the cutest voice I've ever heard. Alas, instead of the nightmare doll voices, many consider the first voiceover performance to be that of the father of voice radio, Reginald Fessenden, who transmitted a test reporting of the weather to the U.S. Weather Bureau in 1900. And on Christmas Eve of 1906, his radio broadcast from Brant Rock, Massachusetts, was heard from wireless operators as far as Norfolk, Virginia. He read Bible verses, played an Edison phonograph recording of Handel's Largo aria, gave a violin solo, and ended the broadcast by wishing his listeners a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Imagine you're a radio operator in 1906 and you've only ever heard the beeps and the boops through the radio, and then suddenly on Christmas Eve you're hearing Bible verses from a human man. That would be like a come to Jesus moment, I feel like, but it wasn't a surprise or anything. They knew it was coming. They were told to tune in to hear it, so. But still, it's wild. This cool moment, however impressive, was not recorded. It was just a live broadcast, nor did it involve any acting, in my opinion. But hey, maybe he got really into his performances of those Bible verses. I don't know. The 1890s to the 1920s were dominated by silent films and, of course, music and theater, but radio dramas hit the scene in a big way in the early 20s. In 1922, the Schenectady, New York station WGY began weekly broadcasts of 40-minute adaptations of stage plays, featuring actors, music, and sound effects. The idea was initially proposed by theater actor Edward H. Smith. The initial cast of the WGY players included Smith and others from his theater group called The Mask. Radio drama stayed in the vogue for much of the 20th century, so it would be silly of me to not address the legend that is George Orwell's 1938 performance of War of the Worlds.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our eyes lead to the inescapable assumption that those strange beings who landed in the Jersey farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars.
It is widely believed that Orwell's modernized radio drama of H.G. Wells' novel War of the Worlds was so convincing that it sent the nation into a mass panic, believing aliens were attacking the planet. Except this is a big ol' exaggeration propagated by the newspaper industry who were salty about their new competition radio. It's like fake news about fake news. The C.E. Hopper Company, who performed radio ratings at the time, determined that only 2% of the potential radio audience of the time was listening to CBS's War of the Worlds program. 2% of the entire 1938 American population would be less than 3 million people. Law enforcement did see a spike in calls for the New Jersey area where the program was meant to take place to request information, to donate blood, because they were angry the show was so realistic, or to congratulate Mercury Theater for an exciting Halloween program. So it seems that the small portion of people who thought it was real, of the already small number of people who were listening, did not resort to panic in the streets. And it seems like a lot of the people who were confused thought that it wasn't aliens attacking. They only heard like a small snippet, or they heard from a friend who heard the radio station and they thought that Nazis were attacking New Jersey or something, you know, not aliens. Researchers have sought to verify rumors of people treated for shock in hospitals due to the radio program, but found it to be nothing but lies. No death has ever been conclusively attributed to the drama, including the persistent rumors of suicide. So why did the newspapers of the time report so widely that the show created mass hysteria across the country? U.S. newspapers wrote nearly 13,000 articles on it over the next month. At the time, newspaper was seeing considerable competition from radio, and this was a great opportunity to tell the people how radio actually isn't that cool, actually. What's so great about radio? Newspaper is just as cute as radio. Newspaper is just as smart as radio. People totally like newspaper just as much as they like radio. And when it become okay for one medium to become the boss of everybody, huh? Because that's not what news is about. We should totally just stab radio! Anywho, the New York Times said, "Radio is new, but it has adult responsibilities. It has not mastered itself or the material it uses." So the newspapers reported on the panic using big buzzwords that sold papers, and Americans vaguely digested these stories and allowed them to snowball over the decades into a country thrown into a dangerous panic and people throwing themselves out of buildings thinking they were getting attacked by Martians. Really, it was just a cool broadcast that maybe caught a few people off guard, confused some people a little bit, but didn't get anybody hurt. Now, we have finally come to cartoons. People like to say that Walt Disney was the first voice actor for Mickey Mouse and Steamboat Willie, but that's not entirely accurate. The first synchronized sound animated shorts came earlier, from the song Cartoons, produced by Max Fleischer and Dave Fleischer between 1924 and 1927, using phonofilm, a sound-on-film process developed by Lee DeForest and Theodore Case in the early 1920s. Many seem to have been lost to time, or at least to the internet, but here's My Old Kentucky Home, released in 1926, featuring the first ever line of dialogue spoken by a cartoon character.
Follow the ball and join in, everybody.
Unfortunately, I can't find anything on the internet to tell me who the hell voiced this line, but I have to assume it was one of the Fleischers, based on how many early animations were voiced just by the creators themselves. By 1930, the character was voiced by Bill Murray. No, not that one. But in the 20s, no idea. This short features a sing-along for My Old Kentucky Home Goodnight, written by Stephen Foster, originally to expose the hardships of slavery, specifically enslaved families being torn apart. But the good intentions of the song go a bit out the window when you end the short with a caricatured, big white-mouthed black man being led by a slice of watermelon on a string. This is the Jim Crow era we're talking about. After Foster sold the song to Firth and Pond, it unfortunately grew in popularity on the blackface minstrel stage, so it is not too surprising that it ended up accompanying some questionable animation in 1926. Even the animated dog, a prototype of Fleischer Studios' mascot Bimbo, like many classic cartoons, imitates minstrelsy with its black skin and large white mouth. This one is missing the typical white gloves, but Bimbo does get them eventually. Obviously, I'm not saying every anthropomorphic cartoon with dark skin, exaggerated white mouth, and white gloves is intentionally racist and/or trying to do a blackface, or even needs to be redesigned today. Like, I'm not personally trying to cancel Mickey Mouse or the Animaniacs. There are bigger fish to fry, but it'd be naive to insist that there was never any connection to blackface and racial stereotypes in the original trend of these classic cartoon designs. But this isn't a video about the history of visual animation. You came here to learn about the voices. I just didn't want to gloss over that because people don't talk about it enough, and I thought it'd just be worth acknowledging rather than plugging your ears and going, la la la, that never happened. But onward we move. 2 years later, in 1928, we got Steamboat Willie and the public debut of Mickey Mouse, played by Walt Disney himself. But Mickey is just one of the characters in this short, all voiced by Walt. Mickey whistles, he blows raspberries, he emotes with growls and squeaks, but like Minnie and Peg-Leg Pete, he doesn't have any intelligible lines. The only actual lines in the short go to the parrot, who is very hard to understand. In 1930, Fleischer Studios debuted a new character in their talk cartoon episode, Dizzy Dishes. One developed to be a female counterpart to Bimbo the dog. She was a canine lounge singer parody of popular singer and actress Helen Kane. She was voiced by Margie Hines, who competed in Helen Kane impersonation contests. And Kane was, not too happy about this. I guess she didn't like being compared to a promiscuous dog. By 1931, Betty Boop had a name, and her dog ears were changed to hoop earrings, and she was officially a human and an absolute hit. And in 1932, Helen Kane filed a $250,000 infringement lawsuit against Max Fleischer and the Paramount Publix Corporation for stealing her persona, with specific emphasis on her signature phrase. Adjusted for inflation today, that lawsuit would be over 5 million smackaroonies. Betty's voice actresses Margie Hines, Little Ann Little, Kate Wright, Bonnie Poe, and Mae Questel were all summoned to testify. The defense argued that this cutesy-wootsy boop-boop-a-doop performance was not Kane's to begin with. They said that Kane herself was inspired by child cabaret singer Esther Lee Jones, known as Baby Esther or Little Esther. Kane had testified that she first debuted her performance style during her engagement at the New York Paramount Theater, but Baby Esther's manager, Lou Bolton, testified that Kane had seen Baby Esther's performance at a New York nightclub in April 1928, before she ever appeared at the Paramount Theater. Esther herself did not testify. She was only 10 or 12 years old at the time, and was probably off performing out of town. Ultimately, the judge ruled in favor of Fleischer that the baby technique of singing did not originate with Helen Kane, and Betty Boop lived on. Jazz scholar Robert G. O'Mealy referred to Baby Esther as Betty Boop's black grandmother, and hell yeah, more people should recognize that, and imagine if Esther had gotten more recognition and compensation for that at the time, or any compensation for that matter. We know that she performed up through 1934, but then her whereabouts are unknown after that, and we have no known recordings of her. sucks. I also just want to add that several photos are regularly erroneously labeled as Baby Esther as associated with Betty Boop, especially this one, and nope, this was indeed Esther Jones who used the stage name Little Esther, but she was Esther Mae Jones who grew to prominence in the 40s and 50s, not Esther Lee Jones who performed in the 20s and 30s and inspired Helen Kane who inspired Betty Boop. And this isn't even close to the only Betty Boop drama. Little Ann Little, the 1933 voice of Betty Boop, claimed she was scatting in a baby voice in 1925 when she was 15, and always claimed to be the original Betty Boop, despite being at least the fourth actress to portray her. In a 1975 interview, she said,
"I'm upset. I'm tired of hearing about these original Betty Boops, and people around here thinking I'm a fraud. I'm the original Betty Boop. I was doing the Boop Boop Doop songs when I was on the road with the vaudeville shows. Then when Max Fleischer was looking for someone for his new Betty Boop cartoon character, I went to the auditions and he chose me. There were hundreds of girls there and most of them could sing better than I could, but I don't know, I suppose I had what he wanted. I was very tiny and very pretty, you know, and I had this high-pitched voice. Anyway, Mr. Fleischer always said I was the original Betty Boop. He even won a court case over me."
she is surely referring to the Kane case, where obviously Ann Little was not the winning argument for Fleischer. In 1932, when Little was cast, Betty had already existed and been played by Margie Hines, Harriet Lee, and Mae Questel. She may not have been called Betty Boop by name in every one of those cartoons, but it is pretty undeniably the same character. She went on to say,
"My friend called me to tell me he heard this Mae Questel on television. She's a little fat woman I met in Mr. Fleischer's office a few times, saying she was the original Betty Boop on the Tom Snyder show. I just want to clear this up. Let me show you this letter. It's from the president of my fan club. He's upset about this Mae Questel thing, too."
This woman. This woman was a piece of work. There is even more Betty Boop actress drama and career overlap, and it's all just very messy and confusing. But essentially, 6 different women voiced Betty throughout the 30s, and a lot of them overlapped or started and then stopped and then started again. This baby way of talking and impersonations of Helen Kane apparently were very popular at the time, and a lot of the actresses like to take credit as the original or the real Betty Boop. But really, when you think about Betty Boop, most people think Mae Questel.
Button up your overcoat, ooh, when the wind is free. And take good care of yourself, you belong to me. Boop, boop-be-doo, oh.
She voiced her from 1931 to 38, longer than any other actress, and even reprised her role 50 years later in the 1988 film Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Work's been kind of slow since cartoons went to color. But I still got it, Eddie. Boop, boop-be-doo.
Yeah.
In 1933, Questel went on to play Olive Oyl in the Popeye cartoons. Olive Oyl was originally voiced by Bonnie Poe, who had tied for first place in the Helen Kane impersonation contest with Questel in 1929, and was also a voice of Betty Boop. And in 1938, Margie Hines, the original voice of Betty Boop, took over as Olive Oyl till Questel returned in 1944. It's all very tangled, clearly. These women with apparently the same face and voice box. And that sums up what I deem to be the beginning of voiceover. But as you can tell, I barely hit the 30s, so we've got a long way to go. Next time I'll tell you about the surprisingly sad truth about Snow White, the first voiceover icons, and who holds the record for a longest consecutive voiceover role, and way more. If you stuck around to the end of this video, please hit that like button so I know this wasn't a waste of time. I am very nervous about this video because it is so different from my usual content. I have a fear of being boring, and I don't want to turn people off from this channel just because I'm doing something different and educational and maybe boring, I don't know. So anything you can do to help the video out, to help get more eyeballs on it by liking, by commenting, by sharing, it would just really, really mean the world to me. I'm aiming to upload part 2 next week, but if it's already up, you can click here or the link in the description to continue this little history lesson. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. You made it this far, you might as well. And we'll see you next week with a brand new video. Bye!
Remus, why did you yawn? I just said I have a fear of being boring.